You are watching Paradigm Shift TV.
Blood. Church Files. Paradigm Shift. TV 314. Thursday nights. We open the archives. This is the Black Church Files.
Where faith meets fact.
The Black Church Files.
Stories buried deep beneath the trials.
From slave ships to the pulpits and the aisles.
Still standing through the hatred and denials.
The Black Church Files.
Where faith meets fact through every trial.
Truth revealed when deception goes wild.
Every Thursday, we reveal the files.
Yeah. From the cotton fields to the choir stands. Bible in the soul, scars on their hands. They try to break us, erase our names. Still we built churches in the middle of pain. Talking history, culture, theology. Not emotional speeches with mythology. We confront the trends, challenge the lies. Bring receipts when the false arise. From conscious debates to identity claims. False teachers online just chasing fame. But the Black church stood through hatred and fire. Still sang hymns while the world conspired.
The stranger's religion, the survival music of people searching for God while the culture confused it. Urban apologetics with facts in the booth. No gimmicks, no fear, just history and truth. The Black Church Files. Stories buried deep beneath the trials.
From slave ships to the pulpits and the aisles.
Still standing through the hatred and denial. The Black Church Files.
Where faith meets fact through every trial.
Truth revealed when deception goes wild. Every Thursday, we reveal the files.
From storefront churches to mega church lights, we discuss the wrongs and defend the rights. Mental health, politics, racism too. What affects the Black church, we speak on it true. No sugarcoating, no performative rage. Just scholarship mixed with the spirit and stage. Breaking down movements, doctrines and myths with historical context they can't dismiss. This for the doubters and wounded souls. For the ones who left church but still seeking wholeness. For the young Black minds caught in confusion, searching for purpose beyond internet movements. Every Thursday on Paradigm Shift TV 314. Historical truth, cultural conversations, urban apologetics.
The Black Church Files.
Where faith meets fact.
The Black Church Files.
All right, welcome to Paradigm Shift TV 314. This is your brother, DMG the Poet, aka Brother Pianki, also known as the infamous DMG. And I appreciate y'all joining me tonight for the first episode of the Black Church Files. I got to send a special shout out to my sister, Michelle Turner, for making this link. It's an honor and a pleasure to be interviewing this brother. And I bring none other than the Damon Richardson, a scholar, a theologian, etc., etc. Please introduce yourself to the Paradigm Shift TV 314 audience.
All right. Well, hey, man, it's good to be on with you. I am Damon Richardson of Urban Logia Ministries, and what do I do? I am a preacher of the gospel, a Bible teacher, college professor, Christian urban apologist, and just a person who is concerned with defending the faith and encouraging people towards biblical literacy and Christian discipleship. So It's just a little bit about me, and for the most part, that's what I spend most of my time doing, not only in the context of the states, but also globally, training pastors, um, even in the context of Africa. So I spend some time as a an academic director on the missions field once or twice a year in Zambia, where I lead a pastoral cohort, training pastors, providing theological education and leadership training for effective leadership in their context. So just there you go, just a little bit about me.
Man of many hats, I see. Okay. So one of the main reasons why I wanted to interview you is two actually. I haven't followed you as closely in past years as I have, like maybe the last year, and I saw that you were really outspoken about white Christian nationalism, and that's something that I think needs to be addressed, especially in today's climate.
Right.
The other reason was a recent video you did where you had a disagreement with a brother that went a little bit left, but you raised a good point in the video. You asked the question that why some of these apologists aren't addressing white Christian nationalism and the threat it poses to the church. And I thought that was something that really needed to be said. Before I get into my official questions, what's your thought process on that as far as the, for lack of a better word, the threat that it may have on the church body as a whole?
Yeah, frame that last part of the question for me so I can understand. I want to be clear on how to answer that. Yeah, I got the first part, but the last part where you're narrowing it down, just frame that a little better for me.
Okay. Yeah, no. As far as white Christian nationalism and the threat that it can pose to the church body as a whole, because I know sometimes I like you saw in the intro, I focus on the Black church, but I think that's something that goes beyond just the Black church. That's an issue with regards to the church body as a whole. And I know you had some criticisms with regards to some of our more prominent apologists not necessarily focusing on that.
Right.
So it's kind of two parts. Why do you feel it's important for some of our more notable outspoken apologists to tackle that? And what type of threat does it pose to the body?
Yeah, so man, it's a really good question, and I really appreciate you asking it, because I do want people to have clarity in terms of where I'm coming from. So the threat remains the same, and it's been a threat. So for instance, when we look at Black identity cults in this country, whether it is the Black Hebrew Israelites or the Nation of Islam, the Nuwapians or 5% Nation of Gods and Earth, whatever you come up with, historically, each one of those groups are, even in misguided, historically revisionist, unbiblical, unredeemed, unregenerated ways, are all responding to racism and white supremacy. Whether we agree with how they're responding to it or not, that's what they are responding to, which means that these groups did not, rise up out of some vacuum. They came as a result of a response to social and historical ills and harm that was being done towards Black people. In fact, they are every bit as a historical response to racism as the Black church is itself. Now, the Black church is a proper response, right? But nonetheless a response, and so are those groups, right? And so, what are they after? When you understand them on their terms, they're seeking to address obviously the harm that is perpetuated against Black people. They are seeking to address things like dignity, identity, and significance, worth, value, things like that, right? So they're trying to recover and retrieve narratives that they think are helpful to Black people, and to deconstruct away from those narratives that they think are harmful. Now, they get it wrong. I get that. And so that is part of the reason why urban apologetics, that is apologetics that is contextualized and focused on dealing with the questions, concerns, pushbacks, and issues that not only persons from those groups have, but people who might even be influenced by the ideologies of those kind of groups might have as it relates to Christianity. So I get that. We need to be able to answer those questions and to be able to equip believers to understand what their theology is, and what it is that they believe, because those are the pain points and those are the issues around which they construct their narratives, right? So we've got to be able to know how to deal with those things, but we can't deal with those things honestly without dealing with the things that cause those questions, doctrines, theologies. We're just not being honest if we're not doing that. And when we set out to put something in writing that gave some definition and some legs to urban apologetics, not that nobody was ever doing it before, but to define it and to put some legs and put some action to it, and to help people understand how do we apply this in our context. It wasn't just about answering or attacking or even debating with Black groups. That wasn't the end goal. The end goal was about restoring Black dignity with the gospel, right? Destroying false narratives around existential Blackness, showing that Black people, regardless of whether they know God, have inherent dignity because they are image bearers, and also being able to admit it, that in the name of Christianity and in the name of the Bible, using the Bible, weaponizing the Bible as a tool, these kinds of harms were perpetuated against Black people. Now, we obviously would draw the distinction between the faithful witness of biblical Christianity versus the misrepresentations, but the fact of the matter is that we've got to be able to admit that these things were done, and in doing so, then we can start answering questions and addressing many of the concerns that are there. But we've got to be able to listen to what the underlying concerns are. They're usually dignity based or identity based or worth and significance based, purpose based, and things like that, right? So after a while, especially being a prominent voice and leader in the urban apologetics community, I just realized that there are a lot of people who just get off on debating Black people and that's it. And that's really low hanging fruit. And what it does is unintentionally, it ends up feeding white supremacist narratives that Black people are wrong anyways. It's what we've been trying to tell you. See, Black people always get it wrong. They're inherently wrong. They're innately wrong. right? So if that's all we're doing, what we're really doing is just essentially giving an alley-oop back to the very same people who questions and issues, the very same people rather who have created the issues in the first place, right? So when we hear questions like, is Christianity the white man's religion and this, that, or the other, that is because that is exactly the way that it looks to many people in the black community, and for a good reason, because there's an entire history of white people hijacking Christianity and attempting to use it in ways that were weaponized against black people, that created economic disenfranchisement and disinheritance and all kinds of other things, right? So those things are true, right? And so if we don't formulate an apologetic as Christians against the misappropriation of Christianity, then essentially we are committing the same harms that we are seeking to address, right? Like,
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right? Like, and if all we're doing is the black church, if all we can ever do is identify black wrongness without addressing what created that wrongness and how those things are not just historical issues, they are contemporary, they are still happening, right? So white supremacy in Christian garb still exists today, didn't go anywhere. White Christian nationalism, no matter what kind of face you put on it, it's essentially just white supremacy in Christian face, right? And so that's been around for a long time, and these groups exist because of that. So if apologetics never has a pushback against that, then all we're doing is proving to the other groups that apologetics, Christianity, and everything else is just a tool of white supremacy. And so when I see black voices and even white voices rush to silence voices like mine, or even protect white supremacist Christian nationalist voices by insulating them from criticism and things like that, then all I see is people throwing an alley-oop to the enemy, right? And so that's never going to be, I'm never going to be good with that, because not only does that end up cutting me off at my knees, it undermines all of the good work that we're doing in the community, and making inroads into the black community, the aspects of the black community that are not Christian, that are more prone to believe some of these narratives, as false as they may be. Christianity is a white man's religion, or it's the religion of the oppressor. And I don't believe those things. Those things are not historically and accurately true. However, they are true when we look at it from the standpoint of, if you're talking about culturally captive, hijacked, misrepresented Christianity, right? Then, or counterfeit Christianity, then yes, right? So that would be like formulating an argument against Islam, when what you're really doing is coming against radical fundamentalism, fundamentalist Islam. Is that, like, that's not a true representation of what Islam actually is, right? So it's kind of like a straw man kind of a situation. So in one sense, it's not really true, but in another sense, if a person doesn't know the difference between a man and a straw man, you've got to point that out. And that's what Frederick Douglass did when he acknowledged in The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass, in the appendix. He talks about how there are two types of Christianity. He said there's the Christianity of Christ, which I love. It's peaceable, it's loving, it's kind, it's this and that. And then he describes the counterfeit version. He calls it the Christianity of this land. And he says it's cradle plundering, it's women whipping, people stealing. It's the worst of all libels. It's false. It's this, that, or the other. But the fact that he is saying it exists and it's real and it is purporting to be Christian is an important distinction to point out, because as far as many Black people know, well, that is Christianity. They don't know that that's not Christianity. It's all being done in the name of Christ. So if we don't speak up and make those distinctions, then in effect, what we're really doing is reinforcing these stereotypes and these false ideas, these false conclusions that many people are coming to about what Christianity is. So in other words, we're really working against ourselves. But I just think the problem is that there are folk who just like debating with Black people. I think they really do. And I don't think they know how white supremacist centered that kind of ambition and impetus really is, right? You know, this prove me wrong. Let's debate, let's argue about it. I think debating is a legitimate enterprise. I do it. But I also think that oftentimes the prove me wrong is essentially a tool of white supremacy, because white supremacy tends to think of itself as being orthodox, standardized, and right, because it sees whiteness as the standard that everything else needs to align with. In fact, it doesn't even see whiteness. Whiteness is just the natural operating impetus that they work from. Everything else is Black or brown or red or the other. And so this kind of standardizing everything, this kind of making centralizing and normalizing and measuring everything around white norms is a very white supremacist kind of idea. And so oftentimes when they're talking about orthodoxy, they're not really talking about biblical orthodoxy. They're talking about white orthodoxy. Does it line up to the cultural ways in which the cultural patterns and norms and forms and ways of thinking and contours of thinking about things that we subscribe to? They don't even think that what they're doing is cultural. They think what they're doing is biblical and everything else is cultural. So they're operating already from, and so oftentimes this whole notion of let's argue with people and move them towards what is considered right, I think that's legitimate if the goal is biblical. But in many unsuspecting ways, you can also be operating from a white supremacist kind of angle, and the real goal is moving people towards that which is culturally acceptable and palatable, ways of thinking about politics, ways of thinking about preaching, ways of thinking about hermeneutics, ways of thinking about what they have defined as true or Christian. And I think we've got to be critical of those things. The problem is that as soon as anything or anybody critiques anything white, it immediately gets identified as racist. See, no matter how much racism they perpetuate, that's all fine. But if you say that's wrong, and then you identify it as coming from white sources, and when you say white, you don't necessarily mean skin tone white. You mean ideologically white.
Right.
It doesn't matter who's perpetuating it. They could be brown, Black, blue, Black. It doesn't matter. If it's coming from a white supremacist ideology, then the fact of the matter is it's wrong. And as soon as you do that, then here they come. Oh, you're using a ethnic lens, and you're using the skin and skin idolatry and all kinds of things, right? So what we really find is that racism and white supremacy is economically rewarding, and it is the most protected thing, ideology and theology in this country. It's like an ant mound. The real mound goes literally about 20 feet underground. The real mound. and they've got chambers and all kinds of things. But step on it, and a million ants are going to bite your ankle, and they're not even in the mound. They're just making sure that you never penetrate that deep. And that is the way that white supremacy has safeguarded and insulated itself from critique. And so it uses a million black, white, Asian, Hispanic ants to bite you as soon as you say white. And they can say black all day long. Black Hebrew Israelites, black this, black church, black, say white church and see what happens. Say
right,
white.
Exactly.
So I'm just calling foul. I'm saying these dudes are cowards. They don't like it, but they really are. And because at the end of the day, to not do that is an attempt to protect something. You're either protecting yourself through self-preservation, you're either protecting your brand, you're protecting your bottom line, you're protecting your proximity to white spaces. Either way it goes, you're protecting something. And as long as you're doing that, you're a coward. There you go.
And hey, listen, I think you just made me set a record for how many times I nodded my head during the interview. Because all I can do is just keep nodding my head. Like, I mean, as the youngsters would say, them was bars. I don't, like, I detect no lies. And it's crazy because I feel like I just came back into the faith 3 years ago. So I spent time on that side of the fence. And so I got a lot of empathy for where they coming from. And as you said, it starts with white supremacy and a reaction to it because somewhere along the line, for various reasons, some personal, some from the outside looking in, but somewhere along the line, they felt like the gospel wasn't sufficient.
Right.
As we know it should be, it wasn't efficient to address the issues that they were having. So I empathize a lot with them, but I also have to point out certain truths. You can't tell me that these people cherry pick scriptures from the Bible, cherry pick them, and we're gonna allow them to allow people to call that Christianity. Because I done pointed this out to several people. If I take the Quran, if I take the Hindu text, I forget it is the Bhagavad Gita or something like that. Any spiritual text, the Pert M. Haru, Book of the Coming Forth by Day, and I cherry pick stuff out of it to my liking, and I kidnap 50 people. I take them up in the mountain, I isolate them, and I tell them this is the Kemetic tradition or this is Islam. When they get back out in the world, people who actually know Islam, people who actually know the Kemetic tradition is not going to accept that cherry pick version of it. But we allow people to say Christianity was forced on our ancestors when we know they didn't even give them the whole corpus of the text. That's problematic. That can't be Christianity. So we got to start right there. First of all, they didn't force. You can't force somebody to believe something. I could say I believe it if you're doing anything to me that's harmful, and when you go away, I'm not agreeing with that. That's one. But two, we act like our ancestors didn't have the mental capacity to see the hypocrisy of these people. And as you pointed out with Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and many other people who actually lived as slaves. Like, we got this thing now where we want to look back in hindsight, never experience what they experienced, and try to break down what it was they went through. But those individuals still believed in Christ and still wanted to follow the teachings of the Bible once they got the whole corpus of the text.
That's right.
Now we get to this point where we think we know better than they did, while at the same time saying we honor and venerate them. It come up short in a lot of different ways. We highlight the enslaver who said he was a Christian, but we never mentioned the abolitionist who said he was a Christian. And when we put that clean glass up against that dirty glass, it don't add up. Absolutely. So everything you said was facts and on point. So salute.
Yeah. Oh man,
for that.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for
my
giving
head
me
a little tired from nodding, but
yeah. Well, thanks for giving me
100%, 100%.
To put that out on even on another platform with another audience of people who would have an opportunity to say, let me hear the brother out. And because what people usually do is they rush in with essentially presuppositions about what they think is being said, and never really hear what's being said. And then the minute that they hear certain words or phrases, their echo chambers and their tribes have already taught them, as soon as you hear this phrase and that phrase and that phrase, just give it a name and then dismiss the rest of the conversation. So as soon as we start talking about, man, we've got to be aware of this. There's that wokeness. There's that wokeness. Let me dismiss the rest of everything he's got to say, because I've demonized, I've been trained and conditioned to demonize conversation by taking words and weaponizing them against the person, so that it justifies me dismissing the entire discourse, right? So it's a real lazy way of engaging. In fact, it gets you out of having to really hear what's being said, because as soon as you hear something that you've learned to identify falsely by using some sort of pejorative that you use as a word to stigmatize or demonize a person. So as soon as I start talking about justice, which is an incredibly biblical concept and idea, there's that leftist liberal stuff. See, this is not a thinking person. This is a person in a cult who has parked their brain at the door. And here's the truth. There are as many people who profess to be Christians who are really in cults, socially, theologically, and personality cults, that don't even realize that they're not thinking, that what they're doing is they're responding and regurgitating based on the ways that they have been conditioned to talk, so that they do not violate. It's kind of like the movie Life. Show them the gun line, boss. Show them the gun line. All these people know where the gun line is. And now what they'll do is they'll try and shoot at me for crossing the gun line. But the fact of the matter is that the real reason they won't cross the gun line is because they know they'll get shot at with the same bullets that they use. So oftentimes when you got these black folk who do all of this caping for Christian nationalism and white supremacy, they already know that the 1 minute that they disagree with these white people who are supporting their channels, then white people are going to hang them from social media trees and pull back all of their support, unsubscribe, and do all of that. And so they've already made a decision that to grift is better than to stand for the truth. They're afraid of that kind of blowback. They don't want that. But what they want more is the acceptance, the attaboys, the pat on the back and the rub on the head and the good job. Tell them, Damon, tell those other blacks how to think. You know, they love that. That makes them feel good. And the fact of the matter is that they don't realize it. Now they'll come here and say, see, you guys, as soon as you say something black in a positive way, you're idolizing blackness. The real truth is that whiteness is their idol. All of that's the real idol. And when I say whiteness, again, I don't necessarily mean white skin or white people. I mean white supremacy. Mm-hmm. And ironically, white supremacy obviously is ideologically and theologically subscribed to predominantly by whites, but they don't just teach it to whites. They want to make sure everybody, because white supremacy doesn't just cause you to think about whites and whiteness in superior ways, morally and intellectually. It also causes you to demonize everything non-white. And that's why all of those channels that create content about black false teachers, what's wrong with the black church, that's why they all have 300,000-400,000 subscribers, because there's money to be made in anti-blackness. As soon as you say, and here's how I know that. For instance, I got smoked with Jamal Bryant too. I mean, Jamal Bryant is no man of God by any biblical standard, right? I don't agree with his teaching, his theology, so forth and so on. It doesn't make him wrong about everything. But here's the point. The point is that you could make 100 Jamal Bryant videos a week. That doesn't mean that Jamal Bryant represents the black church, right?
Yep.
If his ideas are false, then his ideas are false. Then deal with his ideas as false ideas. Call him a false teacher. I mean, that's fitting. But when you say he's a black false teacher, and this is why the black church is in danger, then you have made false doctrine pathologically and inherently a black problem. Now, in the reverse, they'll point out somebody like Kenneth Copeland, and they'll just say he's a false teacher. They'll never say he's a white false teacher. Or see, this is the problem with the white church. Look at how prevalent false doctrine is in the white church. No, he's just individually a false teacher. But let that false teacher be black, and suddenly he's an avatar and a representative of the entire black church. That's how white supremacy works. And whites do it, and then they reward the blacks who build their channels and their platforms by doing the very same thing. And then these Negroes have convinced themselves that what they're doing is apologetics. That's not apologetic. That's just white supremacy in apologetic face.
Yep. And it is funny that you mentioned that, because I was talking to somebody the other day and I was telling them, you notice with the whole Eddie Long scandal, he was a black minister, a black teacher, a black pastor, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember exactly who, if it was Benny Hinn or if it was another minister, but he wasn't black. And you never heard his ethnicity mentioned in whatever scandal he ended up being attached to. And I'm like, it reminded me of how when Dylan Ruth went in that church and killed 9 black people.
Right.
After they welcomed him in and embraced him, he was a troubled youth. But Trayvon Martin could get stalked by somebody who was told not to follow him, and he was a black man. Who a violent young black man, and they show pictures of him smoking weed and holding a gun, basically criminalizing the victim in this crime, while Dylan Ruth was just a troubled young man.
Yeah, there you go.
And we buy into it.
Yeah, man. Listen, I tell you this. So I mean, we can always find folk who teach falsely, like, and trust me, there's a whole lot of black ones who, the Tiffany Montgomerys and the Marcus Rogerses of the world. These people are in effect outliers when it comes down to the black church. They may represent effectively 1% to 2% of teachers that are out there who even teach like that, right? Now that's a problem. But it being a problem doesn't make it a problem entirely for the black church, because their teaching is also in white spaces too. In fact, find a theological error in Christianity, and I can show you that those errors all come from white spaces. For instance, oneness Pentecostalism. White Pentecostal preachers invented that. They took the ancient heresy of Sabellianism and repackaged that and repurposed it in Pentecostal characteristic. Whites did that. Seventh-day Adventism, whites did that. The Watchtower Society of the Jehovah's Witnesses, whites did that. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, i.e. the Mormons, whites did that. The New Apostolic Reformation, whites did that. Hyper charismatic kookiness, delivering spiritual type ministries, those are predominantly white. Black people learn those things from the white. So when you get people like Allie Beth Stuckey that get on, and suddenly the word faith theology, Kenneth E.W. Kenyon, Kenneth Hagin, Kenneth Copeland, this, that, and the other, all of those things were started by whites. Your Fred Prices and your Creflo Dollars and your Leroy Thompsons are essentially a fraction of the subscribers of Word Faith prosperity kind of heresy, right? But notice when they want to poke a hole at the black church, why is it that most black churches subscribe to prosperity theology, saying nothing about you understand what I'm saying? Like this is insane. Like this is nuts. But as soon as we point it out, they think that there's something wrong with our critique. But the fact of the matter is that we know what their critique is actually rooted in. It is rooted in white supremacy. It's truer. You can take the worst outlier that happens to be a black false teacher. The fact that they are a false teacher ain't because they are black. It's because they subscribe to false doctrine. But I can tell you something that is true, right? If you take Robert Jeffers of First Baptist Dallas or Jensen Franklin, it is more true that they are rank and file white evangelicals representing the rank and file white evangelical than it is true that Jamal Bryant or Freddie Haynes or anybody else that might be seen to be, politically radicalized or this, that, the other. It's more true that those people represent the majority of the white church than it is true that these guys represent the black church. That's a fact. If most black preachers do not agree with people like Howard John Wesley or Jamal Bryant, I know that to be a fact.
Yeah. And it's funny how they use some of us, because I heard what you said, and I've been thinking this for years, but I never heard anybody come out and say it or illustrate it the way you did. They will take, and I'm for lack of a better term, they take tokens and they put them in front of people and have them denigrate black people. I like Vodi Bakum. And for those who rock with Vodi Bakum, I don't mean any disrespect. I'm just pointing out something. They use that man to a black face with accomplishments, with education. They use him to put down black people and the black church. Right. We seen it in real time.
Yeah. And here's what they think. They think that the problem that we have is the inability to disagree. I don't have a problem with folk who disagree, even if it can be proven that they're wrong. If they're disagreeing in based on what they think are reasonable, rational explanations, I mean, it's up to me to point out how wrong those things are. But if they are respectfully misunderstanding and they're rooting it in some intellectual conclusion, I can respect that. What I can't respect is rushing past 15 million black people to find 2 black people that you agree with, and the only reason you agree with them is because they're really agreeing with you. And then you want to amplify their voices and weaponize them against the majority of the black people that you bypass because you don't really want to hear what they have to say. You're really only interested in these 2 voices because they are now operating essentially as parrots for what you believe. Now watch this. Let those 2 people disagree with you and you'll start saying the same thing about them that you say about the 15 million that you buy. And that is the problem I have with Vodi Bakum. Vodi Bakum was essentially a voice, a weapon, a tool, essentially like a taskmaster. Here, let's give them a microphone. Let's give them platforms. And I don't say this as somebody who is standing afar off. I have personally sat in at least 3 or 4 services where Vodi Bakum was the keynote speaker. Personally. And I'm talking about 99.9% of everybody in the audience was white except for me and 1 or 2 other blacks. So I know exactly what he was doing, what he was saying, and how he was actually feeding white evangelicals reformed, non-reformed, whatever, false narratives about Black people that actually fueled their views of Christian nationalism, justified their prejudices, their sense of superiority, and all of those things. I heard it with my own ears. I was there. I saw how literally it was literally no different than any radical, let's say there's some Muslim imam that is radicalizing young Muslims around hatred for the West, this, that, and the other. That's exactly what he was doing for these white people in these groups, radicalizing them around the very kinds of ideologies and theologies that they have used to justify their support for this current lunatic in the office of presidency.
Wow. And I do have to get to the questions, but I got one more freelance for you.
Oh yeah. Hey, we got so far off. My apologies.
I know, but hey, listen, it been a vibe, so I'm not mad. Years ago, I heard James White, who is a prominent Christian apologist, theologian, scholar, etc., linguist, I believe, textual critic. Years ago, I couldn't tell you how many, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I heard him say, and I wasn't even in, one thing about my journey is even when I wasn't professing salvation, I always had a connection to the church because, salute to my aunt-in-law or my aunt-in-love, she, because of my affection for Black history, she would always, hey, and come February, hey, we need you to do the Black History program. Mm-hmm. And that kind of kept me tethered to the church because it would always be something church related. And salute to my queen, she in the audience somewhere. She was praying for me, and so were a lot of other people. But as I'm hearing this, I got offended, even being somebody who at the time wouldn't profess in belief. He said that the Black church lacks sound theological teaching. And I'm paraphrasing, but it was something along those lines. What was your thought process, or what was your thinking on that when you heard it, if you had heard it back when he said it?
Yeah, I remember. I mean, it literally confirmed for me that what I had always thought about him. So he just said the quiet part out loud. That's how they think, because they already think that Blacks are inferior to them. So when you contextualize that around a quote unquote kind of Christianity, then it sounds like, well, they don't really contribute to Christianity in the more meaningful ways that we do. They don't do theology in the same ways that we do. And so they expect that we have to move towards them in order to get learned, in order to do better theology, in order to even learn the gospel. We've got to move towards them. So in other words, it's better for them. And we've heard people like, again, Doug Wilson and some of these other guys literally articulated in this very same way. It is better for Black Christians to get up under white pastors because they see their leadership as being superior. They think that they have the truth and we don't. And so as we abandon our spaces, well, better. They think, well, that's good, because if you move towards us, it will fare better for you. Then you will have a better chance at becoming a Bible-believing Christian. Then you'll have true formation and legitimate discipleship. Then you've got a shot at becoming a real theologian, right? So for all of the education that Vody got, he still lacked critical thinking and doing real theology, because his theology was always tethered to essentially doing theology in the ways that they did it. And he didn't allow himself to be put in spaces where he could be challenged by people that he disagreed with. So he stayed in those echo chambers, in those tribes, in those silos where he could get praise. But he avoided getting on stages with persons with equal scholarship or more that could actually provide credible pushback against many of the things that he was saying. So these people are these are some of the ways in which they operate. I've never thought much of James White's scholarship anyway. I think his scholarship is wanting for much. He's not much of a theologian, if you ask me. Now, everybody who follows folk always think the folk they follow are the smartest, until like Geno Jennings's followers think he's untouchable, and that's because Geno Jennings has never had a conversation with me, right? And he won't, because he already knows, well, if I get on a stage with somebody that can run circles around me, I lose the kind of reputation that I've gained among the people, that I've reinforced this idea that I'm untouchable in the word. So what does he do? He cherry picks conversations with people that he know he can handle, and then he rigs the conversation so that he's always the winner. And so in reality, when I've heard James White in a lot of these conversations, they're all low-hanging fruit. I mean, you're debating with Muslims. Islam is not a very difficult religion to debate against. They can't prove any of their historical claims. Their textual criticism is the worst kind of position that they would want to be in. Anyway, that's low-hanging fruit, right? But you understand what I'm saying? I just don't really hear him actually engaging in at the levels of academics or theology. To me, I've never been impressed. I've never been impressed with him. And when I hear his exegesis, I hear exactly where the lack of critical thinking comes from. I hear the lack of contextualization in his historical and cultural exegesis. And that is because he's only learned how to do it in those white spaces. And in his mind, he thinks that's the only right way to do it. And until he exposes himself with people that aren't impressed with the ways in which he talks, right? Like all of your conscious dudes, like everybody thought that Brother Polite was somebody until, you know what I mean? It's, oh man, this man. One guy told me when we were setting up the debate, Brother Polite his mind is otherworldly. I said, well, you would think that, right? You would think that because you don't know better, right? But somebody else listening to him knows that that is what you would call pseudo-intellectualism. Everybody who is looking up to people like James White thinks obviously that he's some sort of a scholar, and that's simply because they just don't know better. They don't actually listen to people who could run circles around James White, because they exist in their tribes and in their silos, and in their mind, this is the best that it gets or whatever. It's only people who agree with them that, you understand what I'm saying? So I'm really impressed with his, first of all, I've never heard him really do any real preaching or teaching. Everything that he does is some sort of crank apologetics or whatever, but I don't agree with him on everything. I think he has said a lot of things that are true. I don't see him, first of all, as a credible theologian. I don't see him as a credible scholar. I don't know whether he's a Bible teacher or a preacher. I don't know what he is, but he certainly stomps for a white supremacist version of Christianity. That much I do know. And so in my mind, James White is not a Christian brother. James White has an entirely different faith from me. James White worships the whiteness, the white version of Christianity, which is no Christianity at all. That is a false gospel. And I know that sounds rough. There's a lot of people, oh, he's coming against the brother.
I'm gonna tell you why it sounds appropriate to me, because I heard James White say this as well. He said Robert E. Lee, when it was brought up how he, not only that he was an enslaver, but how horribly he treated his slaves. And you know, like I know, when somebody say you treated your slaves horribly, and they talking about our ancestors in the antebellum South, we know that they were all treated horribly. So
Right.
for somebody to emphasize how horrible he treated them, he must have took it to another level. And James White said he was simply a man of his time.
There you go.
He still believed he was a Christian brother.
People who,
and I'm like,
who agree with that.
What?
Yeah, notice the people who agree with that.
Yeah.
It's always people in those silos. So, for instance, MacArthur writes, he made the same argument. In fact, he even promoted the curse of Ham, right? And then you say, well, who would agree with that? Well, people in those silos and in those echo chambers agree with that because they look up to these guys. They think that these guys are. MacArthur was no theologian. MacArthur he wasn't Dr. John MacArthur. He didn't have any earned doctorate degree. So where did all of this acclaim come from? It came from the people following him. They made him king. They made him some world acclaimed Bible teacher. When in reality, John MacArthur was not a good Bible teacher, right? Pipers, these guys. What I'm saying is the people who think that are their followers. Yeah. Outside of their followers, these guys, people do not look at them as theological scholar. Piper's not a theological scholar. He is not. Right. And again, I'm not disagreeing with everything that they say. What I am saying is the folk who think that these guys, and every last one of them, when you start evaluating their biblical anthropology, you'll start seeing where the cracks are in terms of their white supremacy. And you got to know how to ask the right questions to press them in the right ways, and then you'll hear it. But I'm just not impressed with these guys. Like the people who are impressed with them are typically white reformed folk or evangelical folk, typically reformed, who think that these guys are the salt and the butter of Christianity, and then the black folk who get brainwashed into these groups, and then they don't even be 5 minutes in the group, and then you ask them, who's your top 5 best preachers? Oh, Paul Archer, John MacArthur, and it just goes to show you like what they're really doing is learning white supremacy in Christian faith, and they don't even realize it. And it's just so that's why I talk the way that I talk. And some people think, oh man, this guy's arrogant, this guy is reckless, and he's dangerous, and this, that, or the other. No, they're all dangerous. I'm just the one that's calling it out. Like I don't have anything to lose, and I don't fear losing anything. They do, which is exactly why they won't call it out, right? So I'm just saying exactly what it is. I am saying the quiet part out loud. That for the most part, most apologetics has now become a tool of white supremacy, no differently than anything else. And unfortunately, even aspects of urban apologetics has bowed down to it as well. Man. It is what it is.
Look, we've been on for basically an hour. I'm gonna get to some of these questions. If we don't get through all of them, it's fine. That give me a reason to try to set up a part 2. But this first one is many members of the Nation of Islam argue that Christianity in America became a tool of colonial control and white supremacy. As a Christian apologist, how do you separate the teachings of Jesus from the historical abuses committed under the banner of Christianity? You kind of already answered it, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, ironically, one of the things is that when you understand some of the historical and theological premises of groups like the Nation of Islam and Black Hebrew Israelites, so forth and so on, even non-organized theologies and ideologies like the conscious community, what you'll find is all of these ideas were mostly stolen from white pseudo scholars anyway. So even that idea, right? So for instance, it's interesting when you read Message to the Black Man in America and Our Savior Has Arrived, they have this same dichotomy, historical Jesus and Jesus of faith. The historical Jesus is the actual Jesus, and he wasn't God, and he was just a prophet, just a good teacher, and he got killed for being revolutionary. And then there's the Jesus of faith. That's the myth. That's the mythological Jesus. That's the one that Christianity invented for X, Y, and Z reasons. Well, interestingly, that dichotomy is exactly what you find in German Protestant liberal theology post-Enlightenment period. They created that binary of the Jesus of history and the Jesus of faith. And so in reality, what the Nation of Islam is reacting to is a Christianity that is not actually Christianity at all. It's the very kind of Christianity that they have borrowed from. Like, so they have built, ironically, a lot of their own ideas on white racist deviations of Christianity. So for instance, liberal theology, that's a deviation of Christianity. I've got facts and evidence that Elijah Muhammad, and then of course the founder Warith Muhammad, well, not Warith Muhammad, his son. Can't remember his name.
Ford Muhammad or something like that.
Yeah, W.D. Farr. That they both borrowed and even plagiarized at many points the teachings of Charles Taze Russell from the Jehovah's Witnesses. Like literally, they borrowed aspects of his eschatology. They borrowed aspects of Mormonism. My whole thing is that the Nation of Islam is steeped in white racist Christian teaching. Like a lot of their own theology was borrowed from that. And so in reality, when they're attacking those forms of Christianity, they're really attacking themselves. They have an entire straw man argument against Christianity. They haven't really said anything against what we believe. What they are attacking are some of the very ideas that they have actually borrowed from. Like say for instance, white supremacy and white racism. Racism shows up in a number of different ways, not just historically, not just theologically, but also scientifically. So for instance, racist white supremacists, they don't believe that that Africans are truly human and that human life originated in Africa, right? They see Black people as coming from lower life forms and white people coming from more intelligent life forms. Well, the Nation of Islam doesn't help that narrative when they teach that Black people weren't even originally Black, that we actually originated 66 trillion years on the moon. And then when we got here to Earth, we were in essentially East Asia. And then we migrated for survival purposes to West Asia, i.e. Africa. And it was in Africa that we actually evolved into dark skin and kinky hair. Well, what does that ultimately say about Black people? Is that affirming? Is that to say that God created us this way? No, it's we ultimately became this way, but we weren't this way originally. So their own cosmogony doesn't actually affirm anything truly dignifying about Blackness. In fact, it affirms the idea that we were something other than that and ultimately became this as a result of evolution. And so in reality, the Nation of Islam,
if I may,
go ahead.
If I may, I think Farrakhan even made it seem as if we devolved because he went into this. I'm sure you saw this. We the only people who hair on our head is not like the hair on our eyebrows.
Yeah, and
our wide noses and our kinky hair was a punishment for disobedience or something to that effect.
Yeah,
and I'm listening to this like, wow, and I'm glad you broke it down with where they got some of these teachings from, because I'm like, this is bananas that this dude, like, how can he even get this off? But it's a powerful tool of self-hatred.
Yeah,
because we already got how we look.
Yeah, even the colorism that exists in the Nation of Islam is an aspect of self-hatred. So for instance, most of all of their leaders have predominantly been lighter skinned blacks. And then you'll notice how, they've promoted, for instance, even the way that you take care of your hair for years. So I was born and raised in the Nation of Islam. So, brushing your hair to the side and, laying it down and getting waves and all of that. All of that is designed. All of that really comes from the emulation of more desirable hairstyles. So if your hair lays down, and where did that come from? Well, when you looked at W.D. Fard, Fard was essentially a white. He was born in Jasper, Texas. His father, according to the census in 1910, was a mulatto, which probably meant that his mom was white and his dad was black. He was of mixed descent. But W.D. Fard has this mulatto father, and most likely his mother was white. And so he identified as white all of his life. And when you look at pictures, this is a white man. And how is his hair? Laying down to the side, so forth and so on. So that becomes essentially a beauty standard for men in the Nation of Islam, to kind of lay their hair down like that. You don't see any facial hair. You don't see anything that promotes that promotes intrinsic African characteristics in the way that they present themselves. They present themselves in ways that are consistent with white measurements, clean shaven, that's not African, that's white. And so the colorism that even exists in the Nation of Islam comes from underlying currents of white supremacy inherent in their own theology. That is a fact.
Ooh, man, let me go to question number 2, man. And I'm thinking about, as you pointed out, the progression of the faces that we see out front for the Nation of Islam, pretty much ever since Khalid Muhammad was excommunicated. He was a very dark-skinned man, and it's gotten much. Wesley Muhammad, I forget the other brother's name. He just did an interview recently, but he a light-skinned brother. Islam, Rizza Islam, all them. But yeah, that's a great point. Yep. So question 2, the conscious community often claims Christianity stripped Black people of their African identity, spirituality, and cultural memory. What faith-based response do you believe Christians must give beyond simply quoting scripture?
I wouldn't give them a faith-based response. I would give them a historically factually based response, right? Now, faith-based responses can be factual when they are rooted in things that are observable, provable, through some sort of documentation or this, that, or the other. Otherwise, a faith-based response wouldn't help to answer a historically based question. So the reality is that, yes, if you talk about hijacked white supremacist forms of Christianity, I would agree with them. I would say, yeah, they went into parts of Africa under the guise of being missionaries, and then they essentially culturalized Black people to make them more acceptable. So because Christianity became synonymous with white, and white was synonymous with good, well, if we make Black people Christians like us, which really means conforming them to ways that fit whiteness, giving them Christian names, right? So you'll notice throughout Africa, that's what you have. They'll have 2 names. They'll have their African name, and then they'll have their quote unquote Christian name. But is it really a Christian name? Like, for instance, Nelson Mandela, right? Mandela is literally his African name. When he went to a boarding school, I've got his autobiography. He said that a white teacher called him Nelson. He was like, I don't even know where she got it from, right? There's nothing biblical or Christian about Nelson. but it is something white about it. And in the context of South Africa being under the British, British rule at the time, well, that's a Christian name. You see what I mean? So yes, I would agree with that. If that they did that in the name of unbiblical, hijacked white supremacist forms of Christianity, but that's just not true Christianity. So I would agree with it because they did it in the name of Christianity, but it wasn't actually Christianity doing it. It was actually white supremacy and racism disguised as Christianity doing the very same thing. And if we're being fair, for instance, in Nigeria, northern Nigeria, Muslim people are getting killed just as fast as Christians are. So is it fair to say that Muslims are killing Muslims? Or is it fair to say that radicalized fundamentalists are the ones doing the killing in northern Nigeria? I am sure the Muslims who are getting macheted do not believe that these people are truly Muslim. So why would we think that people who stole and hijacked and kidnapped and brutalized and did all these things in the name of Christianity were actually Christians?
Man, and that's another excellent point, bro, because I tell people this all the time. What y'all are doing when you say they were given a Christian name, what you're doing is you superimposing Europeanism, white supremacy, colonialism. You superimposing that over Christianity. It's nothing Christian about giving you a European name.
That's right.
But we've been allowing them to say that that's Christian for so long. You've accepted it instead of accepting the truth that your ancestors who experienced these things already pointed out to you.
Right. And DMG, the thing that's so ironic about that, as soon as they accept that narrative, they're actually accepting the lies that were literally told by white people. So essentially you're saying, I agree with the whites on this issue because those ideas actually come from them. So black people can't have it both ways. You cannot say Christianity, biblical Christianity, was forced on black people and then turn around and say that Christianity is the white man's religion. When enslaved black people who were Christians didn't say that. They were saying we are practicing biblical Christianity and these folk are not. And they were not saying that it was forced on them. In fact, in their narratives, and I've got hundreds of pages of the narratives of enslaved black people, and especially the ones that come from Christians. And they will tell you in their own voices that the whites didn't want us to be Christians, that they sold us off if they found out we were practicing Christianity.
Facts.
They beat us. They killed us. They did all kinds of horrible things because they didn't want us to practice biblical Christianity. And so, in effect, when we dismiss the voices of black people who are saying that, and then buy into the notion that Christianity was forced on black people, what black people today are choosing to believe is white folk over black people, which in effect totally undermines their whole claim that they are against racism. Well, it seems like you're supporting it when it's convenient, when you want to form a negative narrative against Christianity, you run to the white narratives in order to be able to do that. Man, listen, I'll say this lastly. When the conscious community that claims to always be so pro-black, like the black mind, the black intellect, and the black this and the black that, they'll act that way until it comes down to Christianity. And then all of a sudden, they start using all of the played out false white narratives against biblical Christianity when a black person is arguing it. I'll prove it. Black people from the conscious community paid Richard Carrier easily $5,000 or
Yes,
more
sir.
to debate me, because they couldn't find anybody to debate me.
And he
And
got
so in their
whopped.
mind, we need a white man because a white man's more authoritative than a black man. And then what they found out is the white man lost in the first 5 minutes. See what I mean? Like, so in other words, black intellect is superior until we disagree with black Christians, and then we need to go find a white man. Let's go find Bart Ehrman. Let's go find Richard Carrier. We need a more intelligent white man in order to debate against the black man. So this is what I'm saying. These Negroes don't even believe. They have bought into white supremacy, and they don't even know it. That's how brainwashed they are.
Man, that is a fact. And I saw that debate happen in real time. It was literally over in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that, because they are pro-black when it comes to everything except Christianity. They honor their ancestors and love their ancestors, except for when it comes to Christianity. And when we talk about Christianity being forced on our ancestors, we had the invisible institution.
Yeah.
Why do you have to hide to do what's mandatory?
Right.
And we gloss over that like these things are not historically proven to have happened. It is disconcerting when you hear these cats that call themselves scholars and historians who just gloss over this stuff. It's crazy. That is an excellent point.
Yeah. And now what do you hear? You hear these black guys running around using Carrier's argument for mythical Jesus. Like literally, like I said, they don't really do real theology. They just plagiarize the poor theology from white pseudo scholars and then give it a black tone and skin to it. But underneath, it's the same white supremacy that they claim that they are against. And Elijah Muhammad does. Listen, the whole notion that black people are Israelites wasn't started by black people. It was started by whites. That was started by white people. It's not. Take any one of those black identity cults, and I can show you where all of them, including Comedicism, got all of their ideas from white people. And yet they want to be coming around talking about the superiority of blackness and what the church ain't doing. The church is the one that uncovered the fact that white supremacy is behind that. That's the real Wizard of Oz behind their own thinking and their own theology. And so the black church has always been a prophetic voice against white supremacy. Ain't no black group in America been more faithful and more vehemently against white supremacy like the black church. You can't find one. When you talk about the black church, come on, I can talk for days about the institution building that we did. Okay, Nation of Islam been around since 1933. Where is the HBCU built by the Nation of Islam? I mean, they built the Mosque Mariam or the University of Islam in Chicago. That ain't no real university. That's just a high school for black kids whose families are in the Nation of Islam, and maybe a parochial school at best for some of the local kids in Chicago. But the black church built greater than 118 institutions that white people even attend. And my point is that we did real institution building in this country that bettered the lives of black people, mutual aid society. I can go on and on and on. So at the end of the day, they don't really have any real thing to say negative about the black church that they haven't borrowed from white supremacists in order to be able to formulate their false narratives anyway.
Man, and that look, it's crazy when you really articulate it the way you just broke that down, man. It's crazy. Yeah. But and I fully agree with you. I'm starting to come to the belief that white supremacists started these groups because ultimately, just like during slavery, they don't want us to be Christian.
Right.
I firmly believe that. I haven't walked it out on how it took place, but I'm just like we saw certain things from the Russian government being planted in our communities about certain things. I believe that it's a COINTELPRO effort to get Black people away from the church, because anytime in our history where we got things done, where we were living properly in the way we needed to live in order to move forward, was when we were ensconced in the Black church. And the further we get away from it, the worse off we are.
Yeah, let me give you some food. Let me give you some food for thought. Just in this quick statement here. Here's some food for thought. Name the Black Hebrew Israelite leader that was, for instance, assassinated. You can't think of one, right?
Can't think of one.
Name the Nation of Islam leader that was assassinated. Now, somebody said, "Oh, Malcolm X." Well, that would be wrong for several reasons.
No.
Number one, he wasn't in the Nation of Islam when he was assassinated, and two, by the time he was assassinated, historically, he was orbiting closer to Martin's ideas than he was where he had previously been in the Nation of Islam. In fact, that is why when Martin was locked up in the Birmingham jail and Coretta spoke in his place that night, Malcolm X was there and was like, I'm starting to see what old dude was saying. Right now, they might have still had some of their ideological differences, but they were orbiting much more closely together at that point than they were before. You'll notice it's at that point that they kill him. And who else do they kill shortly after?
Facts.
Now, here's the interesting thing. They ain't never killed Elijah Muhammad, and they definitely ain't never killed Louis Farrakhan. Louis Farrakhan's 95 years old. Right? So if they were really the threat, my point is this: the Black voices that have always been the most threatening are the voices that have actually come from more of a Black church prophetic tradition. And here's the fact that I know: Malcolm's tradition came from Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was a Black Christian. Malcolm's dad was a Garveyite. That is, in effect, what made Malcolm more dangerous than his Nation of Islam ideology. Because as long as he was saying what they were saying, here's the other thing I know. It was a week after Malcolm went on WBLS radio in New York that he was dead. Malcolm got on and blew the roof off the top when he said white supremacist organizations fund the Nation of Islam. And he even pointed to how that's how they were getting that farmland in Indiana and all that other stuff. And he pointed to a meeting that he attended with the minister in Atlanta of the Nation of Islam right here in my city. And they met with one of the leaders of a major white supremacist organization. And they were there representing Elijah Muhammad. They were being financially underwritten because they had mutually agreeable goals, and that is, let's keep our people apart from each other. And so Malcolm was never dangerous when he was going along with that. He became dangerous when he started going in the opposite direction. And that whole deal about any means necessary, that ain't a Nation of Islam mantra. That actually was borrowed from Reverend Henry Highland Garnett, an African-American preacher who was a free Black in the North in the 18th century that was convincing the convention of Black people that we need to go down and do something about our Black brothers and sisters enslaved in the South, and we need to do it by any means necessary. Interestingly, Frederick Douglass disagreed with him that night, and 5 years later, Frederick Douglass said Henry Highland Garnett was correct. And so the point of the matter is that Malcolm was dangerous because he was operating more so in the black church prophetic tradition than he was in any nation of Israel. As long as he was preaching that, they didn't bother him. As soon as he started sounding differently, he became dangerous. And that's one thing that I know. Nobody else in the Nation of Islam got killed except for him, which is the very same reason that they killed King.
And that's 100% facts. And I'm gonna say this before I get to the next question, just to piggyback off what you were saying. Yeah. And I got all the admiration in the world for Malcolm X. I really do. I'm trying to get up to Harlem for my 50th birthday to visit his grave site. But what people fail to point out is when Malcolm was in the nation, and him, Elijah Muhammad, and all the other ministers were up in the North, safe, while they were criticizing what Martin and his followers were doing, while Martin and his black church followers were putting their lives on the line, getting cracked over the head, while Malcolm was up in the North, safe, criticizing what they was doing. What got done for black people in this country in the 50s and 60s was done off the backbone of the black church, period. It's undeniable.
That's it. And Malcolm,
speaking of the black church.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying Malcolm recognized that later and was disgusted with himself for having sat on the sidelines all those years. And he said, you know, we had all these negative narratives about the black preacher, old greasy chicken head, chicken eating Baptist preacher, you know, got black people doing the bidding of the master and this, that, and the other. And he lamented the fact that he had been saying that when he realized that them same black preachers were more courageous than any of them in the nation had been. And he lamented the fact that he had been sitting on the sideline all that time. And that's why he started trying to mobilize and say, man, we need to start joining forces with. I'm not saying that he was theologically moving in the direction of Martin, but ideologically, he was like, man, these dudes been doing it. We were the chumps. We were, like you said, sitting in Chicago and in New York and in Philly and Boston, safe. You know, we were in the stands. We were Monday morning armchair quarterbacking, and these dudes were in the game getting brutalized. And he lamented the fact of that. You're absolutely right, brother. I'm glad you brought that up.
And I see my brother Captain K from and that's my brother. That's my brother in real life. But this is where me and Cap disagree. They got a lot of disrespectful stuff to say about Dr. King, but I'm gonna tell y'all real quick before I get to my next question, and I'm gonna let Damon piggyback off of it if he want to. What people who like to say Dr. King led our people into getting beat up and done bad and all of this, they fail to recognize the genius of the man's strategy. See, the nonviolent protests wouldn't to get our people beat up. That's asinine to even say that. Number one, it was to put America on blast to the rest of the world. See, America got a habit of policing other countries and telling them how to treat their citizens. So what Dr. King did, when you saw those newscasts of our women getting dog sicked on, water hoses, beat over the head with billy clubs, other countries, including Cuba, start saying, hold up, how you gonna tell us how to treat our people? And this is what you're doing to your citizens. John F. Kennedy wasn't moving, but when his hypocrisy and America's hypocrisy got put on blast, he had no other choice but to act. The very fact that you able to get on YouTube right now and talk bad about Dr. King is because of the sacrifice Dr. King made. Go ahead, brother. I'm gonna pull up that next question.
Bro, you talking my language. Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama occurred on March 7th, 1965. It embarrassed America so bad because it made white people look in the mirror at how ugly racism was. You want to know when the Civil Rights Bill was passed? August 6, 1965, several months later. They looked at the television in disgust at how ugly and nasty they were. how ungodly, how demonic white supremacy and racism had made them and had turned them into immoral monsters. That was a genius, and it had accomplished more in that time than and the interesting thing is he got incredible pushback, not just from whites, but even from blacks. I mean, that was the whole reason why the PNBC, the Progressive National Baptist Convention, literally split and formed its own convention, because in the National Baptist Convention, they were looking to do take a more, what you would say, a more moderate approach. You know, one that's one that is not progressive, but one that is gradual is the terminology.
Yeah.
Like
less disruptive.
Yeah, less disruptive. If we are less threatening and more palatable, ultimately they'll see. And Martin and the civil rights leaders, who were primarily, by the way, Christian preachers, understood that the fastest way for these people to see ungodliness is to show it to them. Yeah. So,
yeah. And when we look at the letter from the Birmingham jail, he openly critiques that line of thinking that, hey, wait a minute, maybe you need to slow down a little bit. No, actually, I need to speed up. I need to get more disruptive instead of pulling back, as y'all was suggesting. But let me get to my next question, because I talk about that for the rest of the night. Some Black Christians openly support the MAGA movement and Christian nationalism, while others see it as deeply connected to racial division and political idolatry. From a biblical perspective, where should Christians draw the line between patriotism and nationalism?
Well, Christian nationalism should never be syncretized with Christianity at any point. In fact, to do so is treasonous to biblical Christianity, right? Nationalism is empire-based, whereas Christianity is kingdom of God-based. So there is no integration and no syncretism between Christian nationalism. Once you add Christianity to anything, you've created it another thing, right? And that's why you can't have Chrislam, Christianity and Islam. That's why you can't have Christianity and Buddhism or whatever. Once you essentially take these two competing worldviews and attempt to merge them together, whether you come up with one new thing or the other, here's the fact: it's no longer Christianity. You have distorted what the gospel actually is. And nationalism, once it intersects and integrates with Christianity, distorts the gospel. And that is why we see people thinking, you're a Christian. You can't be a Christian if you vote for the Democratic Party. So hence, being a Christian means voting Republican. Being a Christian means supporting a candidate like Donald Trump. So they see their identity as correlated with their politics, with their quote unquote love for America. They see America as God's chosen, hence others are not, right? And so this essentially creates ideas and practices that are the antithesis and in competition with those of Scripture. If you're a biblical Christian, we are called to love one another, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of what nationality, what country they come from. Christian nationalism, you can't do that. It's America first. And since being American means being white, and being white means being Christian, then essentially they want to form a society around those ideals, not really around Scripture. As for patriotism, I can prove this. I challenge anybody to prove me different. You can't find more patriotic people than Black people.
Facts. Right.
That's
a fact.
White people are not more patriotic than Black people. The day that, and here's how I know. Oh, he's racist. No, I'm smart. Here's a historical fact. The day that white people will fight for a country that gave them no rights at all, and saw us and would see them as social non-persons, oppress them, and then make them fight, that's when I will say white people are patriotic, right? Patriotism is what you find black people doing. You found black people literally forced to fight for the Confederacy, for an opportunity to ultimately find some sort of freedom. They were told that if they fought, then they could earn their own liberty. And so they fought with their own liberty in mind, even though the Confederacy had them fighting against their own best interests. Show me white people willing to do that, and then I'll agree that white people are patriotic. I haven't seen a patriotic white person yet in that definition of it. And I'm not saying, and I'm just being honest. I'm being honest. Black people went to Vietnam, came back, spat on, couldn't find jobs, and yet fought for, it's like what Muhammad Ali said. He said, y'all send us over into the South Pacific to kill yellow people and brown people and people who look like me, not like y'all. And then you treat us this way in a country that we can't even find jobs in the country. And so show me white people willing to fight for a country that disadvantages them. And then maybe I'll be willing to agree that white people too are patriotic. Now, that's what patriotism looks like. And by that definition, there are no people more patriotic than black people. And they can get mad all they want, but I tell you what, you can't find an argument that can refute that. That's a fact.
Yeah, and there it is. I couldn't agree more. It's like, hey, listen, man, the brother been cooking since he got on here. If y'all got a question for the brother in the chat, listen, the super chat is open because we're not going to do the whole open panel thing. I can't take a chance on some of y'all behaving and being respectful, and that's what it got to be tonight. So if you have a question for the brother, hit the super chat and ask your question. We are monetized. The super chat is working. Use it. I don't care what amount you pay. You can pay $1, but if you got a question for the brother, use that super chat. That being said, question number 4. There is a notion that the Nation of Islam has succeeded in areas where many churches struggled with discipline, economic empowerment, male accountability, and community structure. What lessons, if any, should the Black church learn from the NOI without compromising Christian doctrine?
Yeah, well, so I would push back against the notion of succeeding in discipline, economic empowerment, male accountability, and community structure. I'd push back against that because, like, again, I'm not saying every single Black church is a model of these things, but the fact of the matter is, for instance, economic empowerment. The Black church has an entire history of creating economies for not just for members of their church, but for Black communities, schools, banks, mutual aids, societies, and all these different kinds of things, universities, seminaries, helping people. For instance, the whole notion of not Howard University. What's the other HU over in Hampton, right? And so when you look at, for instance, the ideological difference between W.E.B. Du Bois suggesting that African Americans ought to go to college and get degrees as ways to advance ourselves economically, and then Booker T. Washington is saying, sure, we ought to get education, but we ought to learn trades and skills because those things will always be in demand. And so what did he start? Hampton University. Show me where the Nation of Islam has ever really contributed to essentially widespread development that are skill-based, education-based, economic-based, land-based, and all of these things in ways that have impacted African Americans at large. But I can show you an entire history until this day where Black churches are actually doing that. Here's something I do think that we can learn from the Nation of Islam. I think that there is a thing in the Black church, not necessarily all Black churches, but I do think that there is a sissification I think there is a sissification in the Black church that tends to appeal more to feminine ways of worship expression that really contributes more to the emasculization of Black men. And so I think the Nation of Islam has been good at being able to attract both men and women, and to be able to speak to men in ways that resonate with masculinity. Whereas in many Black churches, we don't even know how to talk to Black men without using feminine kinds of ways of speaking in order to be able to do that. For instance, we have overly emotionalized the church as a viable worship response. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be emotional. What I'm saying is that women are by nature more emotional than men. And so if you make the primary way of communicating your message emotional charged, then what you are really doing is communicating in feminine ways. And this is one of the reasons why we are seeing a decline in Black men looking at the church as a viable option for them, and they're starting to look to the cults, because what they see, even if it's some perverted form of it, they are seeing what looks like healthy masculine expression more so than what they are seeing in churches. You'll go to a church convention and you'll see a dude wearing an outfit, a blouse. Mike Todd, for instance, wearing blouses and got a hair bun and all kinds of stuff. You got dudes with sequins and shoes that look like they got them out of Lane Bryant, and blouses and all kinds of stuff. You won't find that in the Nation of Islam. You won't find that in some of these groups. And I do think that we need to get back to balancing the ways in which we minister to men in contradistinctive ways than which we minister to women. This overtly feminine culture in the church is toxic, and I could say more about that, but I do think that is something that we could learn from the Nation of Islam.
Absolutely. And I apologize. I don't know what happened to my camera, but I'm trying to figure that out. But let's keep going. I'll see if I can get it figured out. If not, we won't worry about it. In debates with Hebrew Israelites, Comedics, and members of the conscious community, many Christians focus heavily on theology while ignoring the emotional and historical pain behind those movements. How important is empathy in apologetics?
I mean, we got to lead with that, right? So before we start trying to formulate how am I going to respond to this person, we have to learn how to hear the underlying concern. And oftentimes the underlying concern ain't even theological. Like I said, oftentimes it's rooted in dignity, or it's rooted in identity, or it's rooted in some sense of purpose or significance. And if we understand essentially what the actual pain point is, rather than the talking point, what's the pain point? That is the real if we learn how to empathize with that and say, you know what, man, I can actually understand how you would probably end up thinking what you think, because yes, this is true. And it has contributed to this, that, and the other. And man, I apologize for that. That's wrong. That's ungodly. Blah, 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 blah. But let me help you understand how the wrong kind of reaction and response to that can land you in a place that's just as wrong as that, right? But what do people want to do? They just hear the question and they rush to essentially the white supremacist method of apologetic, and that is just prove the person wrong, right? Rather than hear the actual concern and what it's actually rooted in, right? And in reality, if we show the right amount of empathy, what we really do is open up opportunities for the person to drop their defenses and be willing to hear, because what they're hearing then is a person that actually cares about them, as opposed to somebody who's just trying to prove them wrong.
Understood, and I agree 100%. And like I say, having been on the other side of that in the comedic thought process, you are 100% right. Even when I would hear things that my spirit was telling me was correct, I would automatically have a pushback based on what I would posit as a lack of empathy or understanding. Even though in my mind, in my spirit, I'm knowing that and I'll give an example for people who've been following me for some time. If y'all remember, shout out to my man Vocab. Me and him are good. That's my man. This is not an indictment on you at all, Vocab. But if you remember this, I was calling Vocab the Vlad TV of the conscious community, because I felt like he was going out of his way to focus on Black movements such as the Israelites, the Comedics, Moors, and Nation of Islam. I had seen videos on all those groups on his channel. And I was wondering why he wasn't focusing on Jehovah's Witnesses or Seventh-day Adventists or Mormons. And I felt like that was out of order. So when me and the brother actually engaged, because he could have responded to me on his channel, we had a mutual acquaintance in G-Con. He could have responded to me on his channel, but G-Con reached out to him. He said he wanted to come over here, and he brought about 100 people with him. So I appreciated that, because I saw what he did. He gave me that opportunity to get my channel out there as opposed to just responding on his channel. But he said some things and he made some great points. But because of how he said it, I couldn't accept it then, because it seemed to be coming from a place that was unempathetic to how I had gotten and how many other people had gotten to where they had gotten as it pertains to walking away from the faith. But once I was able to kind of, as they say with the prodigal son, come back to myself, I realized he was right in what he said. It was just at that particular time, I wasn't able to hear it. Before we get to this last question, I want to read both of our sisters, Michelle Turner's question. She says, do you have any books you contributed to, any upcoming events you are a part of, a documentary you have done, or a website people can visit?
Absolutely. Let me hold on one second. Here are two books that I have contributed to. One is Volume 1 of Urban Apologetics, Restoring Black Dignity with the Gospel. I wrote Chapter 6 in this book on the Nation of Islam. And this is Volume 2 of Urban Apologetics, Cults and Cultural Ideologies, Biblical and Theological Challenges Facing Christians. I wrote Chapter 10 and 11 in these in this text on the Jehovah's Witnesses and prosperity theology. All of those things are written from the standpoint of why those groups are not better alternatives for Black people than biblical Christianity. Not only how to engage with those groups or how to prove their doctrines and their contentions wrong, but why those groups become attractive to Black people in the first place. And so in order to do that, you've got to be able to address what the issues are. And even as J.K. Van Balen said, the cults are the unpaid bills of the church. Well, you've got to show how where essentially the vacuum was created and the cracks and the issues existed that essentially gave rise to and formulated these wrong-headed kinds of expressions, right? So if you're not speaking to that, then you really don't have the proper biblical empathy for the person you're talking to. You are just vested in proving their theology wrong, and that's it. If your apologetic is not truly holding hands with justice, with evangelism, with discipleship and things like that, then it's just really, what good is it? What good is it?
Absolutely. And again, I can speak to that from personal experience, I came into the quote unquote conscious community probably about 12 or so years ago. And when I came into the online part of that community, I met a brother named Jerome Green. He added me to a bunch of different groups. I met him in Vocab's chat, as a matter of fact. And between himself and a bunch of other brothers, my brother Nobody in the chat, BK, as I call him, the Don of urban apologetics, Alfredo, Byron Washington, Najiti, a bunch of brothers who didn't reject me and actually had engaged in conversation with me. Pastor Trey Williams, Pastor Robert Ash, and were praying for me. And one of the funny stories I tell people is I had some janky equipment as far as doing this YouTube channel. My wife, who was a staunch Christian and was having a hard time dealing with this ideology I had got myself involved in. I come home one day and she had bought me all new equipment. And I'm like, what made you do this? She said, the Lord told her to do it. And in my mind, I'm blowing it off like, okay, whatever, the Lord told you to do it, thanks. But, not knowing that would further my engagement in this community. And before I knew it, as a non-Christian, I had more Christians coming on my channel than I did non-believers because the brothers wrapped their arms around me. They was praying for me and they helped me come back to myself. And I give those brothers, along with my wife and my church family that was praying for me, Michelle Turner, shout out to her, and her sister's group that was also praying for me. I give them full credit for helping me get my mind right, because I was coming up with some stuff, and like I said, in my spirit, I knew I was in error, but because a church hurt played a part in it, and a lot of historical misinformation played a part in it, but ultimately, thank God I was able to get my head back on straight.
God be the glory. Yeah.
And so empathy is very, very important.
100%. 100%.
Last question. Christian nationalism often represents America as a chosen nation with a divine mandate. How does that ideology conflict with the global and multi-ethnic message of the gospel?
Well, the whole notion of chosen nation, as it relates to ethnic triumphalism, has always been condemned in Scripture. Always. So I know people think, oh yeah, no, they're just saying the same thing that the Israelites in Scripture said. Well, there's a difference between what God said about the Israelites and what the Israelites said about themselves. God called Abraham out, chose that nation as a conduit about which to bring about the Messiah who would bring about the promise he made to Abraham, and that is, through your seed, all nations of the earth will be blessed. So the point of choosing that nation was not to choose the nation above nations, but to choose the nation to be the conduit through which the Messiah would actually bring people from all nations into God's family. So nationalism and ethnic triumphalism was never God's goal. Israel read too far into their chosenness and started seeing themselves as better than other people. That, in fact, it was condemned by Yahweh, condemned under the ministry of Jesus and under the ministry of Paul in the New Testament. And so it's interesting that you've got cults and various groups like Christian nationalism, even Hebrew Israelism, and or even its various forms, sometimes Hebrew roots movement and all these things. At the end of the day, all of them are making the same fundamental error, and that is that they are centering nationality or ethnicity as the means by which a person somehow becomes right with God, and whether you call it Christian nationalism, It's really making a religion out of whiteness is really what it is. Because again, we have the historical documents that show that they made white, American, and Christian synonymous terms, right? So to be truly American is to be truly Christian, and to be truly Christian is to really, truly be white. And that is white in all of its ideological forms and norms and contours and all these other things. So we've got to reject that because at the end of the day, it fundamentally insults God's purpose in creation. When God made every human an image bearer, that meant every human had the same exact dignity. Christian nationalism is just a whole nother face, is just a different face of white supremacy, which at the end of the day exalts whiteness above everything else. There is nothing compatible about that with Christianity and all of this goofiness that these folk are doing out there in the name of being a Christian and an apologist, by trying to act like there's no real definition for Christian nationalism is just doing the devil's bidding. Here's the other thing I noticed about that is that every nationalistic, ethnic triumphalist group is violent, murderous, and hateful. Christian nationalism is exactly that. Listen to Charlie Kirk and what he actually felt about violence, and what he actually felt about how people ought to use guns, and what he actually felt about Black people. That's violence. That's not just mental violence and physical violence. It's spiritual violence. Look at, for instance, the Black Hebrew Israelites. They got all this to say about Christianity and the civil rights movement and MLK. Well, it was a dude that was influenced by Hebrew Israelism, Marcus Wayne Chenault, in 1974, who literally drove here to Atlanta to kill Martin Luther King's mom because he felt like Christians were misleading Black people. And yet that's supposed to be a better alternative for Black people, something that literally makes you violent and something that makes you murderous and hateful, right? And so you can't say he was influenced by scripture. It's a fact that he was influenced by Hebrew Israelism, right? So they got all of this to say, but what have they really done, right? Where has any of their ideology actually got them, but pushed them further onto the fringes of everything, right? So in reality, Christian nationalism, I think, is a greater existential threat than all of those other groups combined. That don't make those groups necessarily not dangerous. What I am saying is that white people typically don't join in mass Black Hebrew Israelite camps. Neither do they join in mass the Nation of Islam, and neither do any of those groups operate at the highest, lowest, and middle levels of government to influence policy and life for millions and millions of Black people. But Christian nationalist ideologues actually do, right? Which makes it existentially and exponentially more dangerous than all of the Black identity cults combined.
And that's facts. And look, see, normally I would think somebody was trying to be funny when they asked this question, but shout out to my brother Nobody, because I know he a Cowboys fan too. And I guess he asking both of us, because we've been talking about so much other stuff. I forgot you was a Cowboys fan like me.
Absolutely.
So salute to you for that. But the brother asks, will the Cowboys go to the Super Bowl this season?
I won't say they'll go to the Super Bowl. I'll say definitively this: we'll go further than we did last year.
I agree 100%. I agree 100% to all the Cowboy haters out there. But hey, this has been a great interview, brother. I hope we can do it again. I definitely appreciate you coming on. Let the people know where they can find you. Michelle, if you're still there, put the brother channel, the link to his channel in the chat. I know you've been doing it, but can you please do it again?
Yeah, that's my girl, Michelle Turner.
Yes, sir.
Check me out, Urban Logia Ministries on YouTube. You'll find live discussions, hundreds of videos, just about on any topic. But you can also find me. There's a podcast called Text Talk with Unc and Wade. And that is also on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and on YouTube as well. That podcast is purely about biblically related topics. So these are all evergreen kind of topics, biblical discussions. It's a great podcast, especially if you want to really nerd out about anything related to scripture. Text Talk with Unc and Wade. Also, go look up the Unspoken documentary. You'll find it on Tubi for free, but you can also find it on Amazon Prime Videos. It's an entire documentary of the contributions of African people to Christianity from its inception through Africa, all the way here through America, which ultimately destroys the whole notion of Christianity as the white man's religion. I'm one of the major contributors to that documentary. You'll hear me with a number of speaking parts in that documentary, along with a number of other great Christian minds, theologians, scholars, pastors, church leaders, Christian influencers, so forth and so on, that also contribute to that question. Definitely look at that. That is an incredible resource. Show it to your churches, show it to your children, your wife, or your husband. You guys sit down and watch it. It will answer a lot of biblical and historical questions about the global identity of Christianity and how people of African descent have contributed to it. And it will dispel a lot of the same false narratives as it relates to white supremacy, Christian nationalism, and even a lot of your Black identity type cults.
Okay, there you go, family. Please go check our brother out, subscribe to his channel, check out the documentaries, check out the podcast. Again, this was definitely one of my favorite interviews. It's already top 5 for me.
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm gonna try to figure out a way for us to do this again. And family, listen. Support this brother. I think he is a much needed presence in our community. Just the information he provided us with tonight was a wealth of quality information. You get even more of on his channel. That being said, I'm gonna let the brother go. Y'all stick around because next week we got our brother, the humble scholar, as I call him. Y'all know him as B. Wash, but Byron Washington will be here. We also got Robert Ash coming up. We got Pastor Trey Williams. And eventually, I got to work on getting BK probably for that 5th episode. Yeah. But we're going to be doing this every Thursday, family. So I hope y'all continue to support. Nice.
Brother,
nice.
I definitely appreciate you, man.
Nice lineup too, man. I know B. Wash and Robert Ash as well. And yeah, I'll probably be tuning in myself, man. So shoot me a link when you or I'll hit the notification bell so I can know when you're going live with those conversations. So
appreciate it. And I'll definitely send you a link as well. All right, family. Listen, man, y'all be here next Thursday. We got B. Wash. And again, we got a nice lineup for y'all. Black Church Files every Thursday. We hope y'all join us. One more time, brother. Much gratitude for you coming on.
Salute.
Peace. We out, family.
You are watching Paradigm Shift TV.
Blood. Church Files. Paradigm Shift. TV 314. Thursday nights. We open the archives. This is the Black Church Files.
Where faith meets fact.
The Black Church Files.
Stories buried deep beneath the trials.
From slave ships to the pulpits and the aisles.
Still standing through the hatred and denials.
The Black Church Files.
Where faith meets back through every trial.
Truth revealed when deception goes wild.
Every Thursday, we reveal the files.
Yeah. From the cotton fields to the choir stands. Bible in the soul, scars on their hands. They try to break us, erase our names. Still we built churches in the middle of pain. Talking history, culture, theology. Not emotional speeches with mythology. We confront the trends, challenge the lies. Bring receipts when the false arise. From conscious debates to identity claims. False teachers online just chasing fame. But the Black church stood through hatred and fire. Still sang hymns while the world conspired.
This ain't just religion, it's survival music of people searching for God while the culture confused it. Urban apologetics with facts in the booth. No gimmicks, no fear, just history and truth. The Black Church Files. Stories buried deep beneath the trials.
From slave ships to the pulpits and the aisles.
Still standing through the hatred and denial. The Black Church Files.
Where faith meets fact through every trial.
Truth revealed when deception goes wild. Every Thursday, we reveal the files.
From storefront churches to mega church lights, we discuss the wrongs and defend the rights. Mental health, politics, racism too. What affects the Black church, we speak on it true. No sugarcoating, no performative rage. Just scholarship mixed with the spirit and stage. Breaking down movements, doctrines and myths with historical context they can't dismiss. This for the doubters and wounded souls. For the ones who left church but still seeking wholeness. For the young Black minds caught in confusion, searching for purpose beyond internet movements. Every Thursday on Paradigm Shift TV 314. Historical truth, cultural conversations, urban apologetics.
The Black Church Files.
Where faith meets fact.
The Black Church Files.